It is Friday, September 17th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to our Week 2 DraftKings podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me again are Jared Smola and Mitch Carl. And this podcast is sponsored by our partners at Fanshare Sports. Fanshare curates hundreds of pieces of daily fantasy sports-related articles, tweets, and podcasts to create the most accurate ownership projections in the industry. Those projections can be found in the lineup generator on DraftSharks.com, and you can find up-to-date ownership info anytime at fansharesports.com. Mitch, before we get to the player picks this week, I have a very important question for you. DFS and Donuts on Twitter. I mean, you seem like a pretty fit guy. Is there something that you're not telling us? Is it really like DFS and Donuts and CrossFit or something?
No, I tell you what, when I started this account, I was a huge donut freak. And that was like, 4 or 5 years ago. And then I had multiple kids. And you know how the metabolism slows down in your late 30s. So it's more so just DFS at this time. But we'll leave the handle as it is.
It's probably good for you to keep the brand going, and also good for you to drop the donuts from the real life handle.
Oh, for sure, man.
You get the kind of handles that you don't want. So we won't waste any more time now. I needed that for me. I don't know if anybody else cares about it, but the people are here for player picks. So let's jump into the quarterbacks. And Jared, why don't you hit us first with Cash QB?
Yeah, it's going to be Justin Herbert for me, and it's going to be a theme. I'm attacking this Chargers-Cowboys game. I don't think that's going to be like contrarian. I think it's going to be the most popular game on the slate. I'm still going to be using it in both cash and tournaments. I'd be shocked if this game like fails. You have two fast-paced offenses. These teams, Dallas and the Chargers, ranked 9th and 10th in situation neutral pace in Week 1. They were both pass-heavy offenses. We know Dallas was easily the pass-heaviest offense in the NFL in Week 1. The Chargers were the 7th pass-heaviest offense in neutral situations in Week 1. Cowboys defense wasn't good to begin with. Now they're without two defensive ends, DeMarcus Lawrence and Randy Gregory are out for this game. Vegas expects the Chargers to score a bunch of points. They have a 29-point implied total. That's the 4th highest on the main slate. So Herbert for $6,700, seems like a bargain to me.
Mm-hmm. Mitch, I'm sure you're going to be on that game too, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to be just fantasy goodness. Absolutely. There's no reason not to be there. I was thinking about it, too, before you had asked me. I was trying to think back who I went with last week in cash games, and then it hit me. I had, the homerism bias took over, and I went with Josh Allen over Kyler Murray, who you guys were pushing. And boy, did I shoot myself in the foot there. Now, looking at it this week, Kyler Murray, he is really up there at 8.2K, and I really like what Jared's saying in this mid-6K price range. There's some viable options for all things DFS, cash games, tournaments, small field GPPs, leagues, head-to-heads. I mean, just that zone is beautiful this week. And the guy I'm on is Dak Prescott. And I simply believe it's because they're just going to have to throw the ball over and over again all season until they figure something out in that backfield, try to get the run game going. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. They didn't even really try. They had an opportunity to even start feeding Zeke a little bit at some point during that game. And they literally just decided we're not going to. And they're just going to keep heaving the ball. I don't think Michael Gallup is a great wide receiver. He's a phenomenal 3, but I don't think there's some precipitous drop off to Cedric Wilson sliding up there and as a 3rd wide receiver. And, Schultz looked good as the tight end 2 last week, had 6 catches on 6 targets. So, they got 2 pass catching tight ends at this point. Blake Jarwin was moving around pretty well out there. And the strength of this offense is throwing the football. And this is going to be a nice high scoring affair. I don't think either team's really going to stop the other one. And, Dak has a very nice floor and ceiling simply due to the pass volume.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get more Zeke at some point than we got in Week 1 when he had 11 carries, but this is going to be a pass-leaning team all season for good reason, because that's where all their talent, not all their talent, that's where their primary talent is. I'm just going to dive into this 6,500 to 6,900 range on DraftKings at quarterback and swim around like Scrooge McDuck, because there's gold all over the place. Dak Prescott against the Chargers, Tom Brady against the Falcons, Jalen Hurts against the 49ers, Justin Herbert against the Cowboys. I mean, all these guys are gems. I don't think any of them is going to bust. Obviously, there's always somebody that we don't expect to bust that does. But heading into the week, I don't see any reason to not believe in any of these quarterbacks. They all have attractive stacking options. So I'm going to try building lineups with all of them. I think who I settle on is probably going to depend on, who I'm stacking with them at wide receiver, what fits best money-wise, and what fits best around them once I get kind of that base laid. But I'm working all these guys in and certainly building lineups for all of them as I head into GPP play. So, Jared, what do you like for tournaments at quarterback? Is there anything different?
I mean, so full disclosure, most of my tournament lineups are going to be either Justin Herbert or Dak Prescott teams. Since we already covered them, I do like Tom Brady as a tournament play. Fanshare has him coming in at just 6.6% ownership. I think in other weeks, that would be closer to like 10, 12%. But just because there's so many strong options this week, Brady's going to get left behind a little bit. I mean, he's priced above Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert. So I think that's going to get some people off him. He had the massive opener, obviously. Brady now has 300 plus passing yards and or 3 or more touchdowns in 9 of his last 12 games dating back to last season. This Falcons defense is bad. The Bucs implied total 32, the highest of the week. So Brady for tournament, 60% ownership. I'll get to a stacking partner with him later. There's lots of options, but there's one guy I like especially after a down week 1.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump to that. I'm not even gonna wait for it, Jared, because I've got that down in the wide receiver section too. I mean, is it the week to go Tom Brady and Mike Evans at $6,100 with people being scared off him by that week 1? You'll get him at low ownership, low salary. You can fit in another number 1 wide receiver from somewhere else, get the savings at multiple positions this week. That might be the way to go here.
Yeah, I'm going to be stacking Brady with Mike Evans. I think 6,100 is too cheap anyways. And then I think Fancher has him coming in around 7% ownership. So, Brady and Evans, I like that stack.
Yeah, we'll talk about him more when we get to wideouts. Mitch, what do you like for tournament quarterbacks?
I'm using the same guy I used last week, and this will be a reoccurring theme until the field starts to catch on to it. It's going to be Kirk Cousins, man. He did exactly what we were hoping for last week, and I had it mentioned on the pod to, use both Jefferson and Thielen. It just missed out. Jefferson didn't score a touchdown. He didn't really get the volume he needed in order to be that solid second person in the stack. But I think you can have an opportunity this week to run it back and do it again. Try it again. And I think it's simply just going to be an offense where these two guys are going to get so many targets. They're going to take up so much of the market share in this passing offense because there's just no one else. There's just no third pass catcher that the team can rely upon. You saw Jefferson get 9 targets last week. Thielen had 10, picked right up where he left off last year, 14 receiving touchdowns, had 2 in week 1. And I think this like trio is not too expensive either. You're looking at about 20.5K for the 3 of them combined. And there's plenty of value again here in week 2, especially with some of this news we got coming out with injuries, where you're going to be able to, take some of these cheaper price running backs, tight ends, defenses, and you pay up for your stack. And on the other side, you can run it back with a myriad of options. Now we've got Rondale Moore had 6 targets. He looked great. Christian Kirk had 5 targets, 5 receptions, 2 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins didn't really pop off the way we'd want to at his price tag, but he's always the upside is always slate winning when you select a guy like Hopkins on a PPR site like DraftKings. So I love that game. I love that stack, and Kirk Cousins is going to keep up having his top. I think it was last time I checked, 27th of all time touchdown rate. Totally underrated this guy is, and I love the targets he has.
Yeah, I mean, if he's throwing 49 passes, we're not usually going to see Justin Jefferson stop at 9 targets. They did pass the ball more in neutral situations than last week, so we'll see if that stays up. I think KJ Osborne has a chance to emerge as the third guy, but I don't think he's going to be up there with Thielen and Jefferson in targets like he was in week 1. So I agree with you that stacking both of those guys with Cousins works well. And Jefferson very nearly scored a touchdown last week and might have, actually. They did review it. There just wasn't enough to overturn it. He might have gotten into the end zone before he hit the ground there. So
yeah, he scored.
Yeah, so I like that guy being in the mix. I'm working on lineups with all the quarterbacks we talked about. I also think that Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray are all in play. I'm going to create lineups with all of these guys, and then Sunday morning I'll talk myself into which ones look the best and probably choose the wrong ones.
Yeah, Minnesota's defense, by the way, is missing multiple starters. So, already looked like a good spot for Arizona's offense. That only helps, and that only helps Kirk Cousins. That makes them more likely they're going to be playing from behind, and Cousins is going to have to be airing it out.
Running back, Mitch, what are you playing for cash?
Oh, yeah, there's a handful of them I really, really like, again, in that mid-6K range. And this is where I lived last week. It worked out quite well. Joe Mixon, again, is just right outside the 6K range. He's at 7K this week, but we'll count it. And then there's a few other options. Chris Carson, I'm going back to the well at 6-1 at home. I like that matchup as well. We just got news about Josh Jacobs being out a few hours ago. I think I saw Shefty post that tweet. Kenyon Drake is 4.9K. He'll be one of the highest owned players on the entire slate, I believe, by the end of the week. Najee Harris at 6.3K. He played 100% of the snaps. He's going to get more touches sooner or later. I don't know what he'll do with those touches, but I'm always happy with taking a guy whom I believe has tremendous upside at 6'3". Potentially could be one of those Joe Mixon week 1 plays where you're looking at a guy where, oh, we should have seen this coming, 29 carries, something like that, where they're just trying to hide Big Ben, who, I'm sorry, yeah, the Bills lost. It really ticked me off, but he did not look super impressive to me. He sure came up clutch at certain times, but he looks so washed. And I think it's only a matter of time before the team is literally forced to just give Najee Harris the ball over and over and over again to try to get up and down that field. There's a few other guys I really, really like, but honestly, that mid 6K range, and then, of course, going all the way to top to Christian McCaffrey is kind of where I'm living this week.
On the other side of that game, that Pittsburgh Raiders game, Kenyon Drake, you mentioned 4,900, probably going to be their number 1 back. Mitch, is there an ownership level if we get to Sunday morning and he's projected at, 25, 30%? Is there a level where you're like, I'm out on Kenyon Drake?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with what I've entered it into. If we're talking cash games, I just plug them in there. I don't really care. If we're talking like a smaller tournament, less than 100 people or so, I'm okay leaving them in there if they're 30%, 40%, if they're really cheap. That's very important to me. As soon as we start getting larger tournaments, then the ownership really starts to take into effect and how much I value and how much I heavily weight certain aspects of using a guy really comes down to how large is the tournament and what's that ownership at. We're talking 35%, 5,000, 6,000 people in the tournament, even larger than that. And yeah, I'm going to try to find a similar price point pivot is what I like to call them, because that allows me to build the same type of lineup that other people are building with someone who just is one player different than that, high owned player. And it's often enough to just make you just unique enough. Think, going from Drake to Chase Edmonds, another guy who will often be overlooked in tournaments. He's cheap again, just like Jared liked him last week, another 4.7K. And, you save $200, you can have a similar build, similar construct that someone else might have with Drake, but you're just different.
Mm-hmm. Jared, what do you like for cash running back?
Yeah, so I'm not even going to play Kenyon Drake in cash. I don't know if you guys saw, but Gruden's talking up Peyton Barber having a pretty, and I don't totally buy that, but I mean, I think we might see Drake get 14 touches and not like 18. Plus, I just hate this spot for the Raiders. Like road game, traveling across the country after a Monday night game, an overtime Monday night game. They're missing both their starting guards are out for this game. So I just don't want anything to do with that. I like Najee Harris. I like Chris Carson. I like Zeke too. $6,200. Dallas is going to be a pass heavy offense. They're not going to be as pass heavy as they were in week 1. That was a matchup thing. Tampa's so good against the run. It was smart for them not to run hardly at all. So, Zeke got the snaps we wanted. He got the pass routes we wanted. He handled like 80% of the running back carries. I just think $6,200 for 3 down back and what should be a shootout. I think that's too cheap. So I'm going to be using Zeke in cash games, even though I'm a little worried about how much gas is left in his tank.
Yeah, I'm starting out looking at Chris Carson and Zeke Elliott at those prices. Kenyon Drake, same thing for me at 4,900. It's one of those, like, it's a price that looks like it's a must play, but he's not a lock to even get those primary touches, and certainly not a lock to deliver on that. That's the kind of guy that I tend to just be averse to using, and it's definitely bitten me at times when I'm underrating how sure the guy is to get those touches. But I don't know, this one makes me feel uncomfortable.
I think you can use him in cash. I think he's fine.
Right.
I think he's a great fade in tournaments if he's going to be like 20% owned.
Mm-hmm. On the GPP side, I wonder if Jonathan Taylor is a good guy to go to this week. It looks like he's going to come in at low ownership, projected at just 4% on DraftKings and our fan share numbers at the moment. 7,200 is a tough price. Mitch mentioned all the guys in the 6K and up to Joe Mixon at 7K range. So, people are going to look at Jonathan Taylor, look at a tougher Rams defense and think, why would I go to him when I can go down to these cheaper guys? I think that's going to make him cheaper. David Montgomery ran well against the Rams in week 1. And I mean, what if the targets that Jonathan Taylor got in week 1 do stay, at least for one more week? I think we all agree he's at least talented enough that if things break in his favor, he has big game potential.
Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell are both questionable for this game now too. So that could push more targets Taylor's way.
Mm-hmm. Mitch, what do you like for tournament running back?
Yeah, I was actually just looking for a tweet from Jared from last week, just to bring it up on the show. Couldn't find it. He tweeted. Pardon?
Is it a good tweet or a bad tweet?
It's a great tweet, my friend. It was Dak Prescott, now let me just, man, I could not find the numbers. I'm pretty good with numbers, though. It was 450 yards, 403, 405, and like 457 over his last 4 healthy games, right? Those are his passing yard totals. Everyone knows about how much he's passed over his last 4 starts, last 4 games in 2020, and then the first game in 2021. And I think everyone's going to say, wow, no Michael Gallup. What a great stack this week. You can plug in Cooper 6'8". You can plug in CeeDee Lamb 6'6". Dak himself is only 6.8K. Keenan Allen is 7K. Mike Williams 6'1". Oh my goodness. There's fantasy goodness everywhere in this game, right? There's your leverage right there. You grab Zeke Elliott, you use him in tournaments. You use that guy who was out there for 84% of the snaps. As you had also posted last week, and I remember this number as well, 72% of all passing routes he was in on last week. I want to say, don't quote me on that number. It was up there though. And, you've got a guy who was on the field for that many plays, that many, that much PPR equity. He's got great touchdown equity on a team that we think is going to score a lot of points. Well, if everyone and their mom is using the passing game, you use the running game, and you can leverage all that ownership. Fade Dak in tournaments, fade the passing game in tournaments, fade Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, all these guys. Go Eckler and go Zeke Elliott.
Love it. Love that. Yep. I like Javonte Williams for tournaments. Kind of, it could be another, price pivot off of Kenny and Drake. You're actually saving $500 with this one. Javonte is just $4,400. Really it's the matchup against Jacksonville. Like after what Houston did to Jacksonville last week, 37 points. Texans running backs combined for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, Javonte Williams, he played half the snaps. He split snaps down the middle with Melvin Gordon. Javonte Williams had 14 carries to Gordon's 11. Give me 14 carries for Javonte Williams against that Jags defense. And I think he's a good bet to pay off that price tag.
Mm-hmm. Over to wide receiver, and we're starting with cash, but Mitch, you warned us on Twitter earlier not to sleep on Cedric Wilson this week, the Cowboys receiver. He's just $3,100 on DraftKings, barely above the position minimum. He leads our dollars per point projections for the position. So obviously we're not sleeping on him in general. My question is, can he work in cash because of that salary, or is he purely a GPP play for you?
Yeah, I think this is going to be similar to what we said last week, where there was all those guys down there and they were kind of a trap, right? And we kind of identified that. And we talked about that last week on our podcast as well, saying, that's probably the position you should pay up. Everyone else is going to be paying down. I'm going to be doing the same thing again this week. I'm not really looking to be in that 3K price range outside of a few players that are involved in a game stack. So, going back to the Dak Prescott throwing the football a million times, if he's doing that, Cedric Wilson is going to be on the field for probably 90% of those snaps this week, just because we're talking about as many warm bodies as we can get out there for the final couple, third and fourth wide receiver positions this week. Cedric Wilson's going to be getting some downfield targets. He's a burner, man. He can run. And if you're going to get a guy at 3.1K who is going to be super volatile, let's be honest, there's no shoe-in for him even catching the football this week, even if he's on the football field a ton. So a guy like that, I'm only using whenever I have Dak Prescott at quarterback, and I'll include him in some type of game stack. And I would probably do that in place of whomever the higher owned projected guy is between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, just to have exposure to the game, be on a chalkier stack, so to speak, that the public is also on, but then to have one critical element of that stack be different, where I'm not using, the 18% owned Amari Cooper and I'm using, sub 5% Cedric Wilson. So within the confines of a game stack is how I would look to use someone like him. There's other guys that kind of pique my interest down in that area. KJ Hamler I'm looking at. I was hoping Tim Patrick would be a lot cheaper. I would have him be the leverage play over KJ Hamler, but Tim Patrick's all the way up there at 4.7K. So KJ Hamler really sticks out there at I believe 3.8K. And I like him in both tournaments and cash games. Yeah, that's right. I know that's a weird one, but I think he's actually really freaking good. Former second-round pick, and I think he'll have his opportunity this week in a game where I think they probably can pour on the points against the Jags, who looked absolutely lost last week.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned not looking down into 3K range much for cash. You might not need to, especially if you're looking Cowboys, because CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper are still both shy of 7K in salary. Lamb's even cheaper than Cooper at 6,400. Maybe he's lower ownership. Maybe we don't even care about the ownership rate for both players in our cash games because they're good enough and we're not playing against large fields here. So I think both of those guys are in play. Ultimately, it's going to depend for me on which quarterback I settle on, stacking the receiver with that guy. Jared, what are you favoring here for cash wideout?
Yeah, CD Lamb and Keenan Allen are the two guys that stick out to me again. Going back to that Cowboys-Chargers game. If there's only 35 points in that game, I'm going to lose a lot of money this week. So I'm going to be heavily invested. But I mean, yeah, CD Lamb 6,400. I think that's just way too cheap. Had the big opener. He was second among all wide receivers in our expected fantasy points model. And the knock against Lamb again was going to be this year that he wasn't running pass routes on like all of the dropbacks. He was only at 77% for the game in week 1. But then after Michael Gallup left that game, Lamb was in for 100% of the pass plays. So, if we get that again, he's going to explode, at least until Gallup gets back. So I love CD Lamb. And then Keenan Allen, $7,000. I mean, to me, Keenan Allen is like right there with anyone is the safest target bet in football right now. He's averaging 12.3 targets in his 12 healthy games with Justin Herbert. He has 10 plus targets in 11 of those 12 games. So, give me 10, 12 targets here. Dallas just got ripped by Chris Godwin, another, slot receiver like Keenan Allen. So great matchup, obviously, plus volume, $7,000. I think he's a really safe play for cash games.
Yeah, it's not even like he has a 20 target Tyler Lockett game mixed in there.
Right.
If you look at the string of games, it's almost all 10 plus targets with like a 1 or 2 8 and 9s mixed in there. So yeah, it's tough to not like Keenan Allen. On the tourney side, we already started touching on him, Jared. So why don't you go ahead and finish the case for Mike Evans at this point at his $6,100?
I mean, it's just like he's a full-time player in that passing game. Like, he's Antonio Brown is still the clear number 3 in Tampa based on playing time. Brady loves him, and when AB's out there, Brady's looking to him. So, but Keenan or Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are the 2 full-time players there. Evans is going to have some more down games because it's so crowded, but he's also going to have some massive games because he's good, because the offense is so good. So, coming off that dud, ownership is suppressed. The price seems suppressed again, $6,100. So I think Evans is like a perfect tournament play this week.
Yeah, he showed us the floor last week. We've also seen plenty of ceiling from him in the past. We know he has multiple touchdown, 150-yard capabilities there. I think there's also room for Antonio Brown at $6K. Mitch, are you playing these Bucks guys at all?
Yeah, I actually love Chris Godwin this week. He is very affordable at 6.6K. We have him projected for 9.1% ownership. And just to compare that with Mike Evans, he is projected for 6.2%. Antonio Brown at 9.4%. So that is the 3 Bucks wide receivers, all sub 10%, all tournament viable. The only guy I want in cash, though, is Chris Godwin. I like that you touched on Antonio Brown only being on the field for portions of that game. He only had a 65% snap rate last week. So I think the numbers kind of hide the fact that he really wasn't out there full time like you would imagine him to have been based on his statistics. So I'm there in tournaments with Antonio Brown, but also only within stacks with Tom Brady. I'm not really looking to pay 6K for a guy who's only on the field 2/3 of the snaps going into the game. There's some other great tournament options this week. I think wide receiver is really interesting. Robert Woods at 5.7 provides you nice leverage over Cooper Kupp at 6K, who I think will be a little bit chalkier after last week's tremendous 10 target, 7 catch, 2 touchdown performance. Robert Woods there, you're going to go under the radar. Former Buffalo Bill is going to go out there at 5.7K, and he has great touchdown equity anytime he takes the field. Matt Stafford looked great, absolutely tremendous in week 1. I think there's opportunity there to go ahead and leverage that ownership against Cooper Kupp owners and roll out Robert Woods at 5.7K. I'm going back to the well with Devonta Smith again, one of my favorite options in week 1. Loved them at 4.5. I love him at 5.4. I think this guy is going to be in the mid 6K by the end of the year, maybe within the next several weeks. He is going to be the alpha in this offense. And he really staked his claim in week 1 with 8 targets. Looked tremendous out there running routes. Looked phenomenal with the football in his hands. I love this guy. I said last week he's this year's Justin Jefferson, and I will stick to that all year. I don't care how the next few weeks look. I truly think the sky is the limit for this kid.
He's off to a better start than Jefferson got off to last year. So he's already ahead.
There you go.
Justin Jefferson was, I think, carrying Olabisi Johnson's pads at this time last year. So I think you set the bar too low for him. I don't want to finish the wide receiver spot before making Jared puke. So I'm going to say that in a Kyler Murray lineup, I'm going down for AJ Green at $3,700. Nobody wants to play him at all in any format. He was second on the team in targets last week. He was well ahead of Rondale Moore in routes run, right up behind DeAndre Hopkins in that category. Now they get a Titans team that's already bad on defense, also lost a starting safety, Amani Hooker, to a foot injury. So Bradley McDougald is not as good in coverage. As far as we know, Hooker's still a fairly new starter, but a weakened defense deep. AJ Green got 2 of 7 red zone targets for the Cardinals last week. He got 1 of 4 in the end zone. So even if he's not that good anymore, he's getting opportunities down there. It's basically the Zeke Elliott argument for a wide receiver. And if I can get 3 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown from a $3,700 receiver, then I'm happy.
I mean, it makes sense on paper. I just don't know if Green can convert the opportunity into fantasy points anymore. I want to mention one more name, Emmanuel Sanders, $4,000. All the usage was there. He's a full-time player in that Bills passing game. Gabe Davis, by the way, banged up with an ankle. I think he's going to play, but maybe his role scaled back a bit. I mean, Sanders is going to be out there. Josh Allen has owned Miami in their past 3 meetings now. So Emmanuel Sanders, $4,000. That seems like a deal to me, and he's gonna be low owned. He's Fanshare has him projected at 3% ownership.
Nice. Mitch, now that Jared got us going with a bill, I'm going to switch us over to tight end. Why don't you tell us what you're playing for cash over there instead of talking about the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, this one's easy for me. It's pay up for Waller. Just plug him in. Don't even do anything different if you have the money. And if you're trying to save a few dial hairs, I'm going down to Rob Gronkowski at 4.7K. Hard not to love the guy. He's just so lovable, that upstate New Yorker. And he's always due for a touchdown basically every single time he straps up for the game. If you're really trying to get funky, which I really don't at this position, it's just too volatile. Cole Kmet down there at 3.7K. He did get the targets last week. He had 7. So if he's going to get the opportunity, that's the first step in order to find fantasy production, I guess. So there you go.
I always enjoy Gronk as well, but I have to say my wife hates him just because of the one play where it was Patriots against the Bills, and he was, or maybe it was last year, but either way, they were on the sideline. Trey White was down, and Gronk dove into the back of his head like he was trying to injure him badly. And ever since then, my wife hates him. Yeah. So he's not lovable to everybody. Just throwing that out there.
Sorry, Mrs. Joff.
For cash, I'm starting with my boo Noah Fant at 4,200, and I'm going down to Jared Cook at 3,900 if I need the savings. That's the area where I'm going to be living because I like both guys. I like their roles. I like the targets they got last week. I like their matchups. Noah Fant gets the Jaguars. Jared Cook and the Chargers get the Cowboys. So there should be points available in each of those, targets available to those guys. So I'm going to stick in that range and save the salary for the other positions. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, it's Fant for me in cash, and I love Gronk and I love Jared Cook. They're going to be tournament plays for me. For cash, I like Fant. As you alluded to, Matt, 8 targets last week, and now Jerry Jeudy's out. So, Fant should get a bump from there. If you need savings, $4,100, Tyler Higbee. He doesn't have as good of a matchup as Fant. Fant gets the Jags, Higbee tougher against the Colts, but Higbee is finally in the full-time role that a lot of people wanted him to be in last year. And that's why he disappointed last year. He was splitting with Everett, but he was out there for every single snap in week 1. Higbee was. So even in a tough matchup, I think he's a good volume bet for that price tag.
Also projected for higher ownership than Fant this week is Higbee. Yeah. On the tourney side, here's how sharp fantasy players are at this point. Adam Troutman is projected for the 3rd highest ownership rate right now at the position by the numbers that we get, behind Tyler Higbee and Kyle Pitts. I mean, he's a smart play at 3K, led the Saints in targets last week, well ahead of Juwan Johnson in routes, even though Johnson was the one who caught the 2 touchdowns, so it looks like he was the bigger fantasy performer. That high ownership rate makes Troutman less attractive to me. I don't know. What do you have going here, Mitch, at tight end for tournaments?
You're muted.
Jared, what do you like for a tournament tight end?
Sorry about that.
No, you're back. You're back.
I'm back. Yeah, I hit the mute button like an idiot. So George Kittle. I mean, I'm settling on him right now. He's like in a weird price tag, right, where everyone seems to be going up to Waller or down to Pitts, down to Higbee, down to Fant, Gronkowski, and then you've got George Kittle just kind of hanging out here in the mid 6K price range. Anytime you get those elite upside plays that are just so awkwardly priced in between someone who might be a superb value who people perceive as having a tremendous ceiling in Kyle Pitts, or players that, like Darren Waller, whom everyone looks at and says, what a great floor. You know what? If I'm going to pay $7K, I'm going to go get Darren Waller instead of George Kittle. And that allows you to get a guy like George Kittle who has the same ceiling as Darren Waller. Let's be honest. He does. Might not have the probability of getting to that ceiling that Darren Waller does, but they have equal upside. and you have him sitting there, the weird price tag, and our current projection has him at 10% ownership. And anytime you get a guy like George Kittle at 10%, I'm happy to do that in a tournament.
Yeah, talk about sharp DFS players. I was hoping Kyle Pitts would go way under owned this week. His price tag goes up. He disappointed everyone as chalk last week, but he's projected as the second or third highest owned tight end. So he's not as good of a tournament play as I thought he was going to be. As I said, I like Gronkowski in tournaments, especially on Brady teams. I think Gronk is as good a touchdown bet as any tight end on this main slate. And then Jared Cook. With Herbert teams, maybe as a run back on your Dak Prescott teams. Dallas just gave up the massive game to Rob Gronkowski in week 1. 8 targets for Jared Cook in week 1. That's a 17% target share. If he stays anywhere near there, he's gonna have a big season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm likely sticking with Noah Fant, Jared Cook in tournaments as well, because the ownership is looking like it's going to be lower on those guys, and Jared Cook especially can be maybe an under-owned option in that matchup that we're all trying to target across our lineups in DFS this week. If I'm looking super cheap, I want to throw out James O'Shaughnessy, $2,700, maybe a nice pivot, probably more pass volume for the Jaguars than some other teams down there. So, he could very well give you a 0, but at 2,700, you're willing to take that shot. Defense, Mitch, what are you playing?
Holy smokes. Did we see last week just the presence of J.J. Watt and what he does for that defense? And he looked healthy. He looked really healthy, and he drew so much attention. He kept blowing up plays in the backfield. I think Cardinals defense could be something serious this year, something fierce, right? And I think they're going to be under-owned for 2 reasons. Number one, they're against Minnesota, a team that does not really turn the ball over too often. And also they're 2.9K. They're, again, awkwardly priced. But again, here we go with a team that I think actually is pretty freaking good on defense with that George Kittle type upside, right? Sandwiched between weird pricing. Cardinals, I think they're like a sub 3 to 5% owned team this week. And I pick 6, strip sack, something like that. And boom, you're flying to the top of the standings with 2% of the field, right? Steelers are really nice at 3K as well against the traveling Las Vegas Raiders. And they're the same price tag of 3K. Eagles 2.4K are tremendous play, I think, against the Jimmy Garoppolo-led 49ers. And I think this could be a week where he's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Eagles are going to keep up with them. They're going to be scoring the football, and they're not going to be able to turn around and hand it off 30 times to these guys. So I think that if you're going to force Jimmy G to have to throw the ball 35 times, there could be some extra sacks, some interceptions. And the Eagles look pretty good in that wide 9 last week.
Yeah, the Vikings, by the way, put up a lot of yardage and plenty of points last week, but the Bengals got into their backfield more than they really should have, and Dalvin Cook didn't run for a whole lot of yardage, so there might be some O-line issues for them to iron out there. So I certainly agree on the upside there. The Eagles at 2,400 are my favorite at home against Jimmy Garoppolo, and that's basically the case. That's the pamphlet. The ownership rate's going to be low because the Niners just scored a bunch of points, and now they're the road favorite, but it's Jimmy Garoppolo. So the Eagles looked awesome in week 1. They came away with the 4th best defensive DVOA. There's a chance that they're a very good defense. There's a chance this doesn't work out, but we always know that when we're taking a low 2K defense. Jared, what do you like on D?
Yeah, you guys nailed the 3 I have down here. I love the Cardinals for tournaments. I might actually end up paying, quote unquote, paying up for the Steelers in cash at 3,000. That's 1,000 more than I like paying in cash. But I don't, I do think the Eagles are fine. I just love this spot for the Steelers against, the Raiders on short rest traveling across the country. And Pittsburgh's D obviously just, kind of shut down the Bills offense. So if I can get there, I think the Steelers at 3K are a great play for cash. It looks like they're going to be the highest owned defense on the slate. So I think you probably fade them in tournaments. And again, as Mitch said, go down $100 to the Cardinals for tournaments.
You think tears from Derek Carr this week?
Oh yeah, definitely. Many.
That's going to do it for this Week 2 DraftKings podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com to get more player recommendations. Check out the lineup generator to build your own lineups with the help of our projections and the fan share ownership projections. For more discussion of DFS and all other formats, you can also join the free Draft Sharks Discord. Find the link to do that in the description for this podcast. For Mitch Carl, Jared Smola, and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaaf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.